Get the inside track on 20 top business trends for 2020 from Joel Block. Joel's insights bring Wall Street to your street so you can profit from the inside in 2020. Just text the word TREND to 72000. That's 72000 and download your free copy today. Grab your phone and get the inside track on business trends that affect you and your business. Just text the word TREND to 72000 for your copy now. This is Profit from the Inside with Joel Block. Insights to give your business the inside track. And now, here's your host, Joel Block.
How often do you wonder if what you are doing today is setting your company up for success in the future, especially as we emerge from the pandemic? To discuss those issues, to answer those questions, Robert Tucker. Robert, welcome to the show.
Great to be on, Joel.
Hey, you have a very impressive register, CV background of materials here. Futurist, founding leader of global innovation movement. You've traveled, you've spoken in 53 countries, written 7 books. You've spoken to 200 of the Fortune 500, former adjunct professor, ABC, NBC, PBS, CNBC. I mean, come on, you've been everywhere. So just so that our listeners know, today's not your first day on the job, right?
Not my first rodeo.
It's not your first rodeo, right? There you go. So, listen, and by the way, you and I know each other a long time. We've debated, we banter, which is fun. So we know each other very well. So, hey, listen, well, thanks very much. So in your experience, are most CEOs of companies, are executive leaders of companies doing a good job of positioning themselves today for the new realities of tomorrow, whatever tomorrow is, whether it's post-pandemic or something else?
Well, first of all, Joel, it's great to be on. And yes, we are friends as well as colleagues and have a history together. I think that that's an open question. Our CEO's positioning, I think they were sort of deer in the headlights like all of us were with the pandemic. It came out of left field. It blindsided us. And just making sure our employees are safe, making sure that our supply chains are functioning, all of those kind of details that had to be done when this thing broke out in February and March kind of distracted us and got us off the major things that we need to be focused on. But what I'm seeing now is a return to that by at least the smartest CEOs.
You mean they're returning, they got derailed into some tactical stuff, but now they're getting back into their strategic focus.
I talked to a CEO that did have a mid-sized company here in Santa Barbara, where I live, and he said, Robert, things are changing so fast. He's in IT support infrastructure for mid-sized companies. Chris Cherwin is his name. He said, we're doing strategic planning 3 times a year to keep up with the pace of change. We should do it once a year, right? And it was just a process, a procedure we went through. Didn't take us very long. Now we're doing it 3 times a year, and I'm hearing that across the board. What's the big picture? What's the environment going to look like in the next 3 to 6 months? And are we competing on ideas? You did that white paper recently. I just dug it. I've read it 3 times. And one of the things you said in there, I want to get this in the record here, is companies compete on their ideas. And that's why I want to talk with you, if we can, about strategic focus, strategic foresight, if you will, and also innovation, and how you run your brain as a CEO. Because if you're not coming up with the ideas, is what I'm saying to audiences, where are the ideas coming from to fuel your future?
Well, I mean, don't all the people in the company, they bring ideas to the table and then you kind of corral the best ones? I mean, what do you see?
Sure. Absolutely. I mean, you're talking to the guy that wrote Innovation is Everybody's Business.
Yeah,
but ultimately, the CEO is responsible for the pipeline of ideas, right? If that pipeline is clogged up, if that pipeline is non-existent, in other words, if the CEO is going around, or the leader, let's just say, to broaden it, if the leader is going around saying, look, I don't want your ideas, get to work. We've got tactical things, we've got firefighting we've got to do today, don't want your ideas. Guess what you'll get? You'll get a culture where you don't hear about those ideas. People will be taking a shower, driving down the highway, and they'll have this $1 billion idea for you. And they will They will hold it. They will not give it to you. They will not surface it because they're afraid, basically.
There's a lot of reasons that people don't ask questions. It could either be that the CEO, kind of doesn't encourage people to contribute, or when they do contribute, they get kind of tyrannical and beat people down, and that's not a good thing either. So how do you navigate those environments? How do you become a leader who encourages everybody to participate so you don't miss one of those billion-dollar ideas?
Well, if I'm known for anything, I think I'm known for the statement that you need a process for innovation. You've got a process for everything else. Why not a process for innovation? But you go in most companies, small, medium, mid-size, and large, and you ask them, how do you do innovation? How do you accomplish innovation in the company? And you will get someone stammering around and very unsure of that in most cases. I mean, there are these innovation vanguard companies that we write about, that I speak about, brag on, if you will, that have developed a process. But one of the key components of that, Joel, is, like we were saying earlier, you do involve your people. I mean, yes, 90-something% of their time is going to be devoted to routine tasks and routine activities and tactical rather than strategic. But you want everybody to have that mindset that they could be the vessel of a billion-dollar idea in the company.
Could you share a little bit about how some companies navigate this whole innovation cycle? What they do, or what some of the better ones are that you've seen?
Well, let me just give you a couple of bars on Procter & Gamble, their innovation initiative, their process for innovation. CEO there a number of years ago said, Robert, when we first started out on our innovation journey, innovation was over there in the R&D labs over there in Cincinnati. He said, today everyone is responsible for innovation. And so I see that in these companies that are really getting ahead in this environment, they're the companies that are taking the time to answer the question that employees have, whether they articulate it or not, which is, if I have an idea, what do you want me to do with it? If I have an idea, what am I expected to do with it? So that's number one. And then the other thing is, will that idea be punished or rewarded? And I don't mean with monetary rewards, because that can get sticky, as you know, from Daniel Pink's research. But I think what really motivates people to take the time to develop their ideas, to shape their ideas and submit their ideas and talk up their ideas is that they are going to be incentivized in that respect rather than disincentivized. So many companies, without really being conscious of it or aware of it, disincentivize innovation or innovative activity or anything that's not just the routine. But you and I know that increasingly over the next decade that routine activities will give way to software, give way to automation, right? Be shipped off.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And what is left is really a person's eye skills, innovation skills, right? So the people that are on this call no doubt have incredible competencies. They have technical skills. They have social skills. They have people skills. They have skills in their functional areas, so functional skills. But what we don't spend a lot of time on yet is thinking about, well, what are these I skills? And I began asking myself that question when a number of years ago, CEOs were coming up to me. I remember one specific food industry CEO. He said, backstage, I was about to address his top 200 people or so from all over North America, and he said, Robert, I read your book, and you talk about these Steve Jobs type people, and we've got good people out there. These are salt of the earth people, and they're competent as hell. But damn, they wait for me to tell them what to do. They wait for me to be the Energizer Bunny here. They'll do it, if I just tell them. And he said, things are changing so rapidly. This is before COVID. This was before the pandemic, right? Things are changing so rapidly. I can't have all the ideas. And so anyway, that's kind of what led me to write this book. So I went out and interviewed 40. I always do interviews. That's my MO, Joel, and probably yours too.
So, Robert, this the CEO that had the problem getting people to come forward with their ideas,
right?
Do you think that was the CEO's problem? I mean, is that something that person owned up to and said, it must be my fault, or how did they solve the problem? What happened?
Well, it was a Midwestern-based company, and probably just a lot of very compatible, warm-hearted people. And ironically, in the world that we're living in, you don't want too many warm-hearted people finishing each other's sentences, right? Because if you and I agree on the way the world works, if we agree, and that's the thing I love about our brainstorming group, our mastermind group, is that we can disagree, right, from time to time. And I was thinking of the Netflix dude just the other day when you were saying that, because he says, everybody's going for this work from home motif, and that's the wave of the future. He says, but I don't like it. He says, and I'll tell you why. He said, people don't disagree. They don't creatively argue to get to the best idea on Zoom. Everything is just like pleasant, and that's not how you get to excellence.
Yeah, boy, that's a great concept, and that really speaks loud and clear to the political problems that we have as a society. Is that we've lost our ability to debate, dive deep, think, consider, evaluate, and that transcends politics because it goes into business, it goes into all kinds of thinking, and I think that as we cut off those abilities, we suffer. But go back to that part where you have just a whole bunch of friendly, nice people that get along perfectly at work, and they're all kind of the same personality. Right. I think you're right. I think it starts with the hiring. They got to hire different kinds of people, which then I guess speaks to a diversity message, not necessarily diversity of what you look like, but diversity of ideas and backgrounds and different kind of people think in different kind of ways.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. And I've written a lot on this particular topic. The diversity is great, and what you need is great facilitation to make that diversity harmonize. And it's not totally difficult, but you definitely do need a harmonizer because, you take a group of engineers that are working on an innovation project, right? It does kind of throw a wrench in the works for them if there's too much diversity or if the group is too large. Our sweet spot, my research shows over the last 30 years of working with groups that are 5 to 7 people. Smaller groups are better. People, will put political appointees on they don't call themselves that, but, we got to have Charlie in there because he'd be offended or because, if he's not on the team, he's going to be upset. No, I tell team leaders, Joel, push back. The results that you're going to be measured on demand that you have a cohesive team, not so much that they're finishing each other's sentences, but that you don't have any deadwood, that you don't have any non-producers on there. I've seen too many politically motivated kind of teams. The number of stories, don't get me started. But if I may, you mentioned, the problems that we're having in our political environment. And that sort of led me to think about all the environments that I have had the pleasure of being in. So many different companies, right? Each culture is like a family. It is unique, right? And as Tolstoy said, all happy families are alike and all unhappy families are different in their own way. I think that was the quote. But what I'm getting to is that there's this sort of tendency toward magical thinking, and if we say something like that, that'll offend the CEO's point of view or his worldview or her worldview. And when you get into innovation, you are going to step on toes like that. That's why there's so much humor in my sessions, because you got to get people lightened up. You got to get them playing with the clay. I get them designing shopping carts and better mousetraps. And if you walk through that room or you were to walk by that conference room, you'd hear a lot of whooping and hollering and howling, and then they can't wait to do the report outs, to show people what they came up with. And
well, listen, by definition, innovation means something's going to be different tomorrow than it is today.
Right.
And so
it's not only just going to be different, like a new color Post-it notes, and we call that innovation, but it will add value. And that's my basic definition of innovation, that it creates new value. And that's right up your alley with all your work and all that you speak about at your conference.
Yeah. But, this is really, I think the idea, I've long been a fan of expanding the gene pool. You have to have lots of different kinds of people at the table to get a good result. Now maybe they need a certain foundational training, like all engineers, or, in order to solve a certain kind of problem. Or maybe you need different perspectives sometimes. And that's kind of the leader's job, is to figure out, when you need to have a room full of engineers, or when you need to have a bunch of different disciplines in the room, and different things require different things. So awesome observation. Thank you for sharing that. Mm-hmm. So what are some of the things that you see that, create an innovation culture that really help companies be successful?
Well, to in effect return to this whole notion of how we think, so we become, which is the whole foundation of the motivation movement, right? I think that's right out of Ecclesiastes or some part of the Bible, but it's Isaiah, I think it is. But it's really, it was the fostering of Earl Nightingale and all these great motivators. You had Mark Victor Hansen on your program just recently, and we all sort of drank from that same cup, which is the law of manifestation, right? We create our own reality. And that has certainly been the case. But I was just going to double back and share a little anecdote because, out and about, you and I hear all sorts of crazy things, and I try to write it down. And so the other day, we speakers say the other day, it was several years ago, but I worked with a major call center company in the state of Ohio. It doesn't matter their name, but one of the first things that my contact person said to me as I entered the premises there to do a consulting assignment with this company is, Robert, you've got to understand something. The call center business is a commodity, right? And I was over working with the Spring Manufacturing Institute at their annual meeting in Savannah. And the lady on the phone said to me, well, I hope you can help our guys, but around here we have an expression. I said, what's that? She said, a spring is a spring is a spring. I thought, holy cow. If a spring is just a commodity, it's this thing that goes bouncy bounce, then maybe these guys will not be able to really receive my message. I started getting a little nervous. So I called her back and said, hey, could you give me the name of your 10 most successful spring manufacturers, right? ABC Spring Company in Idaho and ABC, XYZ. And I called each and every one of those CEOs because I was worried. And I, in the course of the conversation, I said, and by the way, is a spring just a spring? Nothing you can do to differentiate it? And they fell off their chair uniformly saying, absolutely, are you crazy? The margins that we're getting on our springs because we do X and Y and Z. I mean, one of them said, we've let our customers tell us that a spring is just a spring is a spring. We're doing all these innovations over here, Robert, but do not share what I'm telling you with my colleagues at the meeting in Savannah, right? They forbid me. And so in the meeting, I still remember they were like poker faced, right? Because they did not want me to share anything that they were doing, but they did not have the mindset that a spring is a spring is a spring. We have to break that mindset, right? We have to identify what are the assumptions that are holding us back, right? We got to assault those assumptions. I worked with Nokia back in 2006.
Oh, my.
I'm an old guy, 67 freaking years old, but as young as a 25-year-old in my mind. But Joel, the Nokia assignment was memorable, and I'll tell you why. That year, they were number 8 on the world's most innovative companies list. They were riding high. They sent me all over Asia, and I'd done quite a bit of work with them. But they said, we want you to come up to Palo Alto and speak at our leadership conference. These are top 50 movers and shakers. These are what they call high potential managers. They're on the way up to the top. This was a company on fire. I mean, they were unstoppable, right? And so I did something during that, for prepping that meeting, that I normally do, which is a brief survey, 5-question survey. One of the questions was, I said, what are the barriers to innovation at your company? And I half expected that question would be left blank when they sent it back, right? Just, hey, we're Nokia, buddy. We don't have any barriers to innovation. But instead, I got back, we're a risk-adverse culture. We don't have time to work on our ideas. Basically operational mindset dominates, those kind of usual suspects, if you will. And I'll never forget the meeting itself, where I'm speaking to these top 50, and I happened to ask them a question that day. I said, if I work for you, and they flew in from all over the world, literally, because Nokia was and is still, a global company. They've moved more into infrastructure and moved out of handsets. But I said, if I work for you and I have an idea, what do you want me to do with it? And this one guy, I'll never forget, he stood up, he said, Tucker, he said, I would just tell you to forget about it. You're just going to frustrate yourself in this company. You're just going to bang your head against the wall. You're not going to get anywhere. We are so operationally minded that, and I thought, holy cow. And there were a few gasps,
So Robert, how do you explain that Nokia is identified as the number 8 innovation company in the world, and 15 years ago,
right.
And they have all these internal problems that are absolutely contrary to what innovative companies typically would do? Was it like a one-hit wonder? They just got lucky with a couple of products, or what do you think it was?
No, they were very, very good at execution. They were very, very good at operational mindset. They were very, very good at expansion all over the globe, right? They went into India and they made cell phones smaller and smaller, but they were in a box. They were in a mental thinking box that was not evident to me, not evident to them at that time, right? But 1 year after that seminar, Apple introduced the iPhone. And Nokia began its spectacular fall from grace from that moment, Joel. And I always think back on that, right? Because I'm supposed to be the guy that's going to warn them, help them to think ahead of the curve, blah, 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 blah. But I didn't see it, and neither did they. But when I see that list, and I use this as a chart in my slides to this day, about all of their barriers, I hold those up to CEOs and I say, do these barriers characterize your company? And if they say, yeah, kind of do, and most of them do, then I say, well, aren't you vulnerable just like Nokia was? Do you think you're in some sort of safe harbor? The world is changing. So we've got to assault our assumptions. We've got to make it okay to push back when that guy says, call centers are a commodity. Wait a minute. That's commodity thinking. It's wrapped around your brain here, right? You'll never get anywhere until you divest yourself of that.
Well, I'll tell you what, man, that to me, I just heard it right there. The word assault assumptions. To me, that's the inside track. That's the best, smartest, and fastest way to get anything done. If you want to be innovative, if you want to make progress, if you want to move to whatever your next level is, you have to assault all of the assumptions that you have going backwards. And I heard you say a couple of things that just made a lot of sense to me. One is that, you have to have a culture that embraces ideas. And that's a critical thing. I heard you say that you have to have a mindset that, is open to new ideas, and, like that commodity mindset thing. I mean, I don't know if people like that can be changed or adjusted. I mean, they just get run over by competitors who have a better mindset. And then the Nokia thing is like the missing link. There was a missing link that they had. And, it's interesting. So these have all been outstanding. I love all this stuff. And that's why you're where you are.
All of these companies that are no longer with us, right? I mean, it seemed to, over the last 3 years, I was kind of specializing in working with those kinds of companies, that are being disrupted, heavily disrupted. And, it took me a long while to be able to ferret out our thinking ruts. that didn't just come naturally, right? But I started my life as a journalist and always asking questions and then kind of cross-checking with, ask the same question to a group of people. And it's really an empowering kind of thing. And I began to see how some people's thinking was what was shooting them in the foot, if you will. And they didn't know it. And they were good people. I mean, these Nokia guys, they wined and dined me. I mean, they sent me on some of the greatest journeys of my life. And I don't want to be speaking out of school with these folks, although probably most of them are working at different companies now. And I certainly don't want to give the impression that they were dumb bunnies. These were, like Mensa quality people,
God,
right?
absolutely.
Right? But that's not enough.
Hey, let me ask you a question, a related question. It is really hard to continue to innovate and stay ahead of the curve. It's really, really hard. You got your business to run, plus you got to be innovative. And you got these little teeny upstart companies in garages that are, aiming torpedoes at your company all the time. So can you think of any examples of companies that have just reinvented themselves over and over and over and have stayed ahead of the curve? Are there any companies that are, Nokia was the example of like the most unfortunate thing that could happen. Have you run into any ones that are just spectacular?
Oh, I run into them all the time. And right now I'm prepping for work with a client in the state of Georgia. And so I'm very Georgia focused, but a lot of them are unsung heroes. They don't appear in Fortune magazine or get written up in Business Week, but they're out there and they're kicking tail even in this very trying time that we're living in. But one that comes to mind in reference to your question is Jeff Bezos. And, Amazon is a company that I hate and I love. I try not to use them. I try to go to the corner bookstore or put my order there, call my order in and pick up the book. It's a little less convenient, but I want Chaucer's books here in Santa Barbara to survive. And I know if I don't support them and buy my books through them, then they will go out of business. And I don't want that, right?
Yeah.
So that's the downside of Amazon. But the upside of Amazon is Jeff Bezos' brain and the way he thinks. He said in an interview, we invent by starting with the customer and working backwards. He said the other guys, they start with, hey, Joel, if we do this idea, how much are we going to make on it? What's the margin going to be? No. That's
the way that accountants and engineers think.
That's right.
Is they invent solutions to problem that they don't even know what the problem is.
That's right. And not to throw all accountants and engineers, because I know some very innovative engineers.
Yeah, of course.
Some very innovative accountants, right? I mean, I once worked with Enron.
Those guys were innovative, all right.
I seriously did. Now, at the time I worked with Enron, they were a great group of people. They went off the cliff. That's another story we'll tell another time. But yeah, I mean, they were doing some serious innovation and a lot of great people, but things can happen.
Listen, Robert, you're a stellar guy. You're a nice friend. I'm delighted to have you as a friend, and thank you for sharing the inside track on some of this innovation. I just love the assumptions. It just is. It's just so perfect. I think that if there's one giant concept that comes out of this discussion, that's really what it is that you really have to attack all of the assumptions that you have and really grab them and shake them, grab them by the collar and give them a good hard shake and see what survives. So thank you for being on the show. And listen, man, thanks for being my friend. And I look forward to being able to get back in person and debating some of this stuff in person.
Well, so do I. And,
all right, man. Well, listen, thanks for being on the show.
You bet, Joe. Take care.
You've been listening to Profit from the Inside with Joel Block. For more insights and to learn more, visit joelblock.com.
How about a shout out and a giant thanks to my podcast producer, David Wolf, and his team at Podcast and Radio Networks. Profit from the Inside simply wouldn't be what it is without David and his team. For more information or to learn how you can launch and produce your own podcast, reach out to podcastandradio.com.
Get the inside track on 20 top business trends for 2020 from Joel Block. Joel's insights bring Wall Street to your street so you can profit from the inside in 2020. Just text the word TREND to 72000. That's 72000 and download your free copy today. Grab your phone and get the inside track on business trends that affect you and your business. Just text the word TREND to 72000 for your copy now.